There is a place on the California coast where the Pacific Ocean meets some of the most dramatic cliffs on Earth. Where the wind howls across fairways carved into rock. Where the greatest golfers in history have stood, and where some of them broke. This is Pebble Beach Golf Links. Opened in 1919, over 100 years ago, on land so beautiful that developers once planned to build luxury homes on every inch of it. But a few dreamers thought this land deserved something different. Something sacred. They were right. Over the past century, Pebble Beach has hosted 6 US Opens, produced some of the most unforgettable moments in sports history, and witnessed 3 legendary players write their names into eternity on these very cliffs. This is the story of Jack Nicklaus, Tom Watson, and Tiger Woods, and the moments at Pebble Beach that changed golf forever. June 1972. Jack Nicklaus arrived at Pebble Beach already the most feared golfer on the planet. They called him the Golden Bear. Powerful, precise, and relentless. He'd already won 11 major championships. But Pebble Beach in US Open conditions was a different beast entirely. The wind that week was vicious. It dried out the greens until they were almost brown. Balls that landed perfectly would roll off the putting surfaces and into the rough. Players were furious. Scores were soaring. But Nicklaus thrived in chaos. Going into the final holes on Sunday, he held a 3-shot lead. Comfortable for most tournaments. But at Pebble Beach, with winds gusting off the Pacific, 3 shots can vanish in an instant. And then came the hole that Nicklaus himself once called the greatest par 3 in the world. Hole number 7. A tiny green perched on a cliff above the Pacific, only 107 yards. But that day, with the wind howling, it played like 200. Nicklaus hit a shot that fought through the wind, landed on the green, and stopped. Par. Safe. He marched on. At hole number 8, one of the most visually stunning holes in all of golf, the fairway runs right along the cliff edge. One bad shot to the right, and your ball is in the Pacific Ocean. But it was hole number 17 that made history. Nicklaus stood in the fairway with a 1-iron in his hands. A 1-iron. The hardest club in the bag to hit. In howling wind. On the most pressure-packed hole of the championship. He swung. The ball flew low, cutting through the wind, hit the flagstick on the fly, and dropped inches from the hole. A tap-in birdie. The crowd erupted. Jack Nicklaus won the 1972 US Open. His 3rd. And that 1-iron on 17 became one of the most famous shots in golf history. But Pebble Beach wasn't done making legends. 10 years later, it would produce a moment even more dramatic. June 1982. The US Open returned to Pebble Beach. And this time, 2 titans collided on the final day. Jack Nicklaus, now 42 years old but still dangerous. And Tom Watson, the man who had become Nicklaus' greatest rival. They had battled before. The 1977 British Open at Turnberry. Called the Duel in the Sun. One of the greatest head-to-head battles in golf history. And now, 5 years later, they were at it again. At Pebble Beach. On Sunday afternoon, Watson and Nicklaus were tied near the top of the leaderboard. Nicklaus finished his round first and posted his number in the clubhouse. Then he waited. And watched. Watson needed to hold on. Just pars. Just survive. And then came hole 17. The same hole where Nicklaus hit that legendary 1-iron 10 years earlier. Watson's tee shot missed the green. His ball nestled into thick, gnarly rough just off the putting surface. It was sitting down in the grass. A nearly impossible lie. Everyone watching, including Nicklaus in the clubhouse, assumed the same thing. Bogey. Maybe worse. Watson would lose the lead. Watson's caddy, Bruce Edwards, looked at the lie and shook his head. Watson looked at him and said something that became one of the most famous lines in golf. "I'm going to make it." His caddy thought he meant he'd get it close. Watson meant something else entirely. He opened the face of his sand wedge, took one look at the hole, and swung. The ball popped out of the rough, landed softly on the green, and rolled, and disappeared into the cup. Watson erupted. He ran around the green, pointing at his caddy, pointing at the crowd, screaming with joy. It was birdie, not bogey. A two-shot swing. The championship was his. He birdied 18 for good measure. Tom Watson won the 1982 U.S. Open by 2 strokes over Jack Nicklaus. And that chip in on 17 became, for many people, the single greatest shot in golf history. Pebble Beach had done it again. But the course had one more chapter to write. And this time, the story would be less about drama and more about pure, absolute domination. June 2000. Tiger Woods was 24 years old. He had already won 2 major championships. He was already the most famous athlete on the planet. But what he did at Pebble Beach that week transcended golf. It transcended sports. It may have been the single greatest individual performance in the history of competitive athletics. It started on Thursday. While other players struggled with the coastal winds and firm greens, Tiger played like the course was a video game set on easy mode. After 2 rounds, he led by 6 shots. After 3 rounds, he led by 10. 10 shots. In a U.S. Open. At Pebble Beach. The other players weren't competing against Tiger. They were competing for second place. But the moment that defined the week, the shot that captured Tiger's terrifying brilliance, came on hole number 6 during the second round. Tiger's ball was sitting in 4-inch rough, 205 yards from the green. A giant tree stood directly in his path. No reasonable golfer would go for the green. The smart play was to chip out sideways and take your medicine. Tiger pulled a 7-iron. He swung with violent force. The ball rocketed out of the thick grass, rose up and over the tree, flew over the mountainous terrain of the second fairway, and somehow, impossibly, found the green. The NBC announcer, Roger Maltby, could only muster 6 words. "It's just not a fair fight." He was right. It wasn't. Tiger Woods won the 2000 U.S. Open by 15 strokes. 15. The largest margin of victory in any major championship in history. He was the only player in the entire field to finish under par. He finished at 12 under. The next best player was 3 over. It was so dominant that years later, other professional golfers, men who had dedicated their entire lives to the sport, openly admitted they felt helpless that week. Jack Nicklaus was 60 years old. 28 years after his 1-iron shook the flagstick on 17. 28 years after he conquered Pebble Beach. The 2000 U.S. Open would be his last. He announced before the tournament that this was it. His final U.S. Open. At the course where he made history, on Friday, Nicklaus played his final holes. The crowd swelled around him. Not because he was contending. He wasn't. He was well back in the field. They came to say goodbye. When he reached the 18th hole, the par 5 that runs along the rugged coastline, something magical happened. With the Pacific Ocean behind him and thousands of fans surrounding the green, Nicklaus hit his second shot. It soared through the air and landed on the green. The ovation was deafening. Men and women were crying in the gallery. Here was the greatest golfer who ever lived, at the course where he wrote his most famous chapter, playing his final hole. He three-putted for par. It didn't matter. The crowd gave him a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. And across the course, a 24-year-old Tiger Woods was busy winning by 15 strokes. The torch had been passed. At the very same course. In the very same week. But Pebble Beach doesn't just make heroes. It also breaks them. 2010. The US Open returned to Pebble Beach once more. Dustin Johnson, young and powerful, entered the final round with a 3-shot lead. Hall of Famers Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, and Ernie Els were all lurking. But 3 shots felt safe. It wasn't. Johnson made a triple bogey on just his second hole of the day. The leaderboard shattered like glass. Suddenly everyone was tied. The pressure was suffocating. In the end, Graham McDowell from Northern Ireland won the championship, shooting 3 over par in the final round. 3 over. On most days, that score gets you nowhere near a trophy. But Pebble Beach had devoured everyone else. McDowell just survived. Nicklaus' 1-iron that hit the flagstick. Watson's impossible chip from the rough. Tiger's 15-stroke annihilation. Nicklaus' emotional farewell. Johnson's heartbreaking collapse. All of it happened here. On these cliffs. On these greens. With the Pacific Ocean watching. Pebble Beach Golf Links isn't just a golf course. It's a stage. And for over 100 years, it has produced stories that will be told for 100 more. If you enjoyed this journey through Pebble Beach, hit the like button and subscribe. More legendary golf stories are coming soon.